If you're waiting for motivation to make you mentally tough, you're sabotaging yourself. And neuroscience proves it. Here's why. Your brain doesn't care about your goals. It cares about keeping you comfortable and safe. So every time you face something hard, your brain screams at you to quit. But here's what most people don't know. In 2012, scientists scanned the brains of soldiers who went through some of the most brutal experiences imaginable. They expected to find damage. Instead, they found growth. Their hippocampus, the brain's emotional control center, had actually grown larger. I've spent the last 2 years studying the neuroscience of mental toughness, and I'm going to show you the 4 brain-based protocols that actually work, so you can become mentally tough beyond any emotion or circumstance. All right, let's start with the most uncomfortable one first, because if you can't handle this, the rest won't matter. Number 1, the accountability mirror method. Here's the painful part. Your brain chooses comfort over growth every single time unless you force it to change. You know that voice in your head that tells you you're doing fine? That you'll start tomorrow? That voice is lying to you. It's keeping you weak. So here's what you do instead. Every single morning, you stand in front of your bathroom mirror and you call out your own bullcrap. Not the comfortable version, the actual truth. Write your goals on sticky notes and put them on that mirror. Things like lose 30 pounds, read for 60 minutes daily, run 5 miles without stopping. Make them specific. Make them measurable. Make them impossible to ignore. Now here's the critical part. Every morning when you look at that mirror, you ask yourself one question. Did I do what I said I would do yesterday? If the answer is no, you don't get to lie about it. You don't get to make excuses. You look yourself in the eye and you acknowledge the gap between who you said you'd be and who you actually were. Why does this work? Because your brain physically changes when you practice brutal honesty. Neuroscientists found that when soldiers went through 18 months of intense stress and challenges, their hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation, actually grew larger. The connective tissue to their prefrontal cortex, which controls rational decision-making, got stronger. They didn't just survive the stress. They became anti-fragile. Their brains evolved to handle more. But here's the mistake everyone makes. They lie to themselves about their progress. They say, I'm trying my best, when they're not. They say, I'll do better tomorrow, when they won't. The accountability mirror destroys that delusion. It forces you to confront the person you actually are, not the person you pretend to be. Before we go any further, if you're finding this valuable so far, click the like button. It helps more people discover this. Okay, let's get to point number 2. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Because mental toughness isn't about suffering for no reason. It's about finding the exact right amount of discomfort. Number 2, we call the Hormetic Zone, strategic discomfort. Pay close attention to this one, because without it, everything else fails. There's a concept in biology called hormesis. It means that a small dose of stress makes you stronger, but too much destroys you. Think of it like lifting weights. If you lift 5 pounds, nothing happens. If you try to lift 500 pounds, you get injured. But if you lift just beyond your current capacity, say 50 pounds when you can handle 45, your muscles adapt and grow. Your brain works the exact same way. Scientists discovered that older adults who did just 30 minutes of mental exercises daily for 10 weeks increased a critical neurotransmitter called acetylcholine by 2.3%. That's the chemical your brain uses for attention and memory. They literally reversed a decade of brain aging in 10 weeks. But here's the key. It had to be challenging, not easy, not impossible. Right in that sweet spot where it's uncomfortable, but doable. So how do you apply this? You deliberately seek discomfort in controlled doses. Take a cold shower for 2 minutes every morning. Run when it's raining instead of waiting for perfect weather. Study the hardest material first when your brain wants to procrastinate. Sign up for that race even though you're not ready. The goal isn't to torture yourself. It's to teach your brain that discomfort is a signal for growth, not a threat to avoid. Here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your brain starts craving the challenge. A guy who weighed 297 pounds and could barely function transformed himself by deliberately choosing the hardest path every single day. He went from reading at a 4th grade level to a high school senior level in 6 months. How? He studied 6 hours for every 1 hour of tutoring. He ran 13 miles in one night when he'd never run more than 2. He forced his brain into the Hormetic Zone over and over until it rewired itself for toughness. But here's the mistake. People either avoid all discomfort, which keeps them weak, or they overwhelm themselves with too much. which leads to burnout. You need to find your edge, that place where you're genuinely uncomfortable, but not destroyed. That's where growth happens. All right? Now let's talk about what happens when you're actually in the middle of suffering. Because knowing you should be tough and actually being tough in the moment are two completely different things. Number 3 is cognitive restructuring under pressure. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. Your emotions don't control you unless you let them. When something hard happens, your amygdala, your brain's fear center, fires off alarm signals. It floods your body with stress hormones. It tells you to quit, to run, to give up. That's your amygdala doing its job, keeping you alive, but keeping you weak. But mentally tough people have a different response system. They use something called cognitive restructuring. It's a 3-step process, and it happens in real time. First, you identify the negative thought. This is too hard. I can't do this. I'm going to fail. Second, you challenge it. Is that actually true? Have I failed at everything I've ever tried? What evidence do I have? Third, you reframe it. This is hard, therefore I'm growing. This discomfort means my brain is adapting. I've handled hard things before, so I can handle this. Researchers tested this with brain imaging. They found the exact spot in your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, your brain's CEO, that activates when you successfully regulate your emotions. Then they stimulated that area while people practiced cognitive restructuring. The results? A 43% decrease in distress, higher heart rate variability, which is a marker of emotional control. And people actually use the skill in their daily lives instead of just knowing about it. Here's a real example. You're in the middle of a brutal workout. Your legs are burning. Your lungs are screaming. Your brain says, stop now or you'll die. That's the moment. You identify, my brain is catastrophizing. You challenge, am I actually dying? No, I'm just uncomfortable. You reframe, this burn means I'm getting stronger. Every second I push through, my mental toughness increases. But here's the mistake everyone makes. They try to suppress the emotion instead of reframing it. They say, don't think about the pain, or just push through. That doesn't work. Your brain knows the pain is there. Suppression takes massive mental energy and eventually fails. Reframing works with your brain's natural systems instead of against them. Right about now is a great moment to drop a quick comment below about a time you successfully reframed a difficult situation. I read and replied to every comment. Now here's the part that actually changes everything. Because all the techniques in the world won't help you if you don't have this one thing locked in. Number 4 is the 1-second decision protocol. Most people wait until they're in crisis to figure out how they'll respond. That's too late. Your brain makes a decision in 1 second when suffering hits. It either says, get out of here, or I've got this. The difference between those two responses isn't willpower, it's pre-programming. Here's how it works. Before you face a challenge, you mentally rehearse the worst-case scenario. Not in a fearful way, in a strategic way. You ask yourself, what's the hardest moment going to feel like? What will my brain tell me when I want to quit? What will I say back? Then you script your response in advance. A guy decided to run a 15-kilometer obstacle race through mud and freezing water. He hadn't trained for it, but he spent weeks mentally rehearsing the suffering. He visualized the moment his body would want to quit. He pre-decided his response. This is temporary. I've survived worse. I trust myself to figure this out. When race day came, he hit every moment of suffering he'd predicted. But because he'd already lived it in his mind, his brain didn't panic. It executed the pre-programmed response. He finished in 2 hours and 23 minutes, which was his personal best ever. Neuroscientists proved this with brain scans. Researchers found that people who went through 3 months of intensive mental training had a reduced attentional blink. That's when your brain gets so focused on one problem that it misses everything else. The trained group allocated fewer mental resources to the first stressor, which meant they had capacity left over for the next one. They'd essentially trained their brains to be more efficient under pressure. Here's how you do this, practically. Before your next hard workout, your next difficult conversation, your next big presentation, you sit down and you write out the script. When I feel like quitting at minute 15, I will remind myself that discomfort is growth. When my voice shakes during the presentation, I will pause, breathe, and continue with confidence. When the other person gets defensive, I will stay calm and restate my point clearly. You're not hoping you'll respond well. You're programming the response in advance. But here's the mistake. People wait until they're already suffering to figure out their response. By then, your prefrontal cortex is offline and your amygdala is in control. You can't think clearly when you're in survival mode. You have to do the thinking before the suffering starts. If you are gaining from this content and you want to keep learning and growing, subscribe to this channel for more science-backed content just like this. All right, so now you have the 4 protocols: the accountability mirror for brutal honesty, the Hormetic Zone for strategic discomfort, cognitive restructuring for real-time emotional control, and the 1-second decision for pre-programming your responses. Now, if you want to actually become mentally tough using these tools, you need to practice them consistently starting today. But that won't work unless you can build the daily habits and systems that support this level of discipline. Good news is, we have you covered. Just watch the video we're queuing up for you right now, where I break down the 15 specific habits that changed my life. It'll help you build the systems that makes mental toughness automatic, instead of exhausting. Just click on the video thumbnail on your screen to watch it now. I absolutely believe it will help you. We'll see you there.